Hi, investors. So here's video number 2. I'm going to jump right in on it because I made 3 videos. This is number 2. Jim Rickards. Now, Jim Rickards is super, super connected. Look him up on YouTube. The guy he's brilliant. He knows things. He's connected with the top people in the world on financial stuff. Jim is saying that the current global monetary system has problems, and needs to be reformed. I think the whole world realizes that. The plan is to devalue the dollar. Listen, the plan is to devalue the dollar at the IMF. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, is stating that they need to devalue the dollar. Negative interest rates will be imposed once we go digital. Otherwise, people will just pull all their money out of the banks. Okay, so what that is we're running into what's called a Triffin dilemma. There was an economist back in the, 1940s, 50s, 60s, or something like that, who stated that if the United States is the dominant currency, which it was and is for now, the problem with that is as we go up higher in value, the rest of the world starts going lower. Okay? And that was always like a problem with picking one country as the standard currency. See, when we first went to the digital dollar, America had tremendously high standards of living in the middle 40s, 50s, 60s, like with Leave It to Beaver, and in the 70s with the Brady Bunch, early 70s started getting gnarly. But let's just say the middle 40s, 50s, and all the 60s. Great times in America, right? Because the dollar was number one. We had just gone on from Bretton Woods in 1944. In 1944, this leads me into number 7. Bretton Woods in 1944 set a gold standard for the world, or at least for the American dollar. And as the U.S. dollar, that was the standard of the whole world's currency. Trade was based on the dollar. Get it? 1944. So that's why the standard of living just skyrocketed way high up. You only had to have one person as a breadwinner in the house. People went on vacations for a couple weeks a year. They had money, this and that. And then starting in 1971, we realized there was a Triffin dilemma. Now I'm giving you like a history lesson so you can put together ideas on what the heck is going on in the world right now and in the past. So the United States was flying high like a kite. Empire State Building and all that stuff's getting built up. We were an industrial leader, cranking out cars. Detroit was the motor city and everything. And America, heck yeah, right? But then in 1971, we realized the higher that we go, the rest of the world goes down. Like they're starving in a lot of the world because our dollar is worth so much. So that's why we decided, the International Monetary Fund people who are kind of running stuff said, hey, United States, your dollar's going to have to drop in value. So we went off the gold standard. And since then, that's when interest rates started going up and the dollar started going down, which made it better for the rest of the world at our expense. Are you catching what's going on here? So, in 1969 is when the IMF developed what's called the SDR, Standard Drawing Rights. It's basically a world currency. And the goal back then, but they didn't have the technology, keep listening now, their goal was to have a reset. But it didn't work because they didn't have this technology. The SDR didn't catch on. The goal was in 1970, so about 25 years, from 1944 up to 70, the gold standard U.S. dollar was the key, but we realized, hey, this is not sustainable because the U.S. is going to end up being the super rich country and everybody else is going to be poor. I don't have a problem with that. But the people at the top realized, hey, we need to help the rest of the world. So they lowered the standard of living, started in 1970. And I think we all know the gap in the United States between the rich and the poor. See, this is where the problem is. It's not about taxing people. The problem is we went off the gold standard and started printing a lot of money, sending jobs overseas, and that's all in here too. You have to start sending all these jobs overseas to help them get money. All this is planned, you got it? It's not random. I'm trying to give you like a truth bomb here. So they wanted to start it, but the digital dollar and the central bank digital currency, those hadn't been invented yet. So the goal was they started realizing in 1970, oh my gosh, America's getting super rich and powerful and the rest of the world's being left behind. So what they started doing was purposely destroying the American dollar. Took it off the gold standard. Notice, since then, inflation's gone up. We had the oil crisis in the 70s. Jobs were starting to get outsourced, meaning jobs were going overseas, this and that. And we developed what's called a trade deficit. And that trade deficit allowed liquidity, allowed dollars to go throughout the world. So now other people could have money and buy and sell and spend. And you notice at about 1970s when the world economy started taking off. China, in 1970, China was nothing. And now you look at it and it's like pretty much number one. India and all these countries around the world developed. Bangladesh, Hong Kong, this, that. Meanwhile, since the 70s, America went down. Do you understand what I'm saying? And all this was done on purpose. I've got a few minutes left on this video. So the problem with a U.S.-dominated dollar, it's called the Triffin Dilemma. The Triffin Dilemma, again, was started by an economist who said, if you pick one country's currency and have that as the global standard, that country would do well and everybody else will go not do well. Okay? So the United States realized, well, the powers that be who control the world, the United States is a puppet. So there's a group of people controlling the world, and I don't know who they are, but I know how they operate. So they said, United States, you're going to have to trash your dollar some to let the rest of the world kind of catch up, which they did, and a lot of them passed us up. Japan, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, India, I could mention other countries. Their economies started to just grow like crazy, and their standard of living is just, in a lot of countries, better than the U.S. in certain areas, okay? Now, some parts of the world, you know, whether it be, I don't know, Africa, certain parts of South America, they didn't do the right things and adapt to capitalism and whatever it might have been, so therefore you miss out, okay? But it was their choice because their leaders of their country didn't want to get mixed up in capitalism. They wanted to keep people oppressed. So the U.S. dollar would make strong. The problem is that the U.S. would have to run trade deficits so the rest of the world could buy goods. So all this trade debt, people were arguing, you know, in the 80s and 90s about trade deficits, and we buy more from other countries than we sell to them. All this was planned to get the dollars out of the country flowing around the world to help raise their standard of living while at the same time hurting America. Got it? And that's what I found was pretty interesting. I'm going to have to make another video, maybe 4. That was the end of that one with the Bretton Woods and the SDR thing. It's just very interesting how we had to hurt, and right now, I'm not going to get into it right now because that's the next video. We're going to have to hurt America even more to bring on this great reset.